The latest exhibition in the Chained Library and Mappa Mundi exhibition space of Hereford Cathedral is Master of the Library. It looks at some of the people who have occupied that role for over 400 years, both the masters themselves and the librarians who have supported them. The title Master of the Library has been given since 1583 to the member of cathedral clergy, either male or female, who has overall care and responsibility for the Chained Library of Hereford Cathedral.
One of the great privileges about being the Canon Chancellor at Hereford Cathedral is that part of my role is to be the Master of the Library, and I'm following in a very long established and well respected legacy of people who've come before, and I'm always keen to learn more and find out about more of the heritage that I'm now responsible for. And there's no one in our cathedral community who knows more about the history of this place than our wonderful archivist Elizabeth. So thank you for allowing me to sit down and chat to you. Tell me how the Chained Library got started, and tell me about the very first Master of the Library.
Okay,
Who was he?
So the Master of the Library began really with the Elizabethan Statutes of 1583. Those rules created the position of somebody who had to care for the library, known as the Master. There were a few people in that early period of the late 16th century who held the role, but the one that's most well known is Thomas Thornton. And he's the man who in the early 17th century actually created the form of the Chained Library as we know it today, with the three-tier book presses.
And what was Thornton's thinking in having Chained Library? Because he was quite inspired by the libraries at Oxford, wasn't he? But what was the thinking behind that?
So books, really valuable. Books could be as much as a farm in terms of their value. So these were not something that you wanted people to wander off with.
You couldn't just go down to Waterstones and get a replacement in those days.
You could not. They could take up to 2 years to copy out a manuscript item, and even the printed books would be still expensive to have. And this was a working library where the clergy of the cathedral would use it as a reference base. So obviously you needed the books to be there for the next person. I always think of it as being like when I was at university, there were certain books you could only loan for a few hours because everybody on your course needed them to write that essay that week. And it's a similar thing. The books were chained to keep them available. If you wanted to read a book, you took yourself to the books in the library, not taking the book back to your house or to your room. So yes, Thornton was inspired by the new form of library furniture. We think of bookcases like this as being, that's how you store books. They were a new thing, a brand new concept in the 17th century. Having stacks of books on top of each other on shelves meant suddenly you could get a lot more books into a smaller space.
So tell us about Thornton himself. What was he like as a man, as a person?
Thornton seems to have been a very energetic man, very knowledgeable, very scholarly, and that was reflected in some of the roles that he had. So not only was he a canon here at Hereford, he also held a role, similar role at Worcester, but he also, as you said, had roles at Oxford. But that did bring him into conflict with the Dean and Chapter here at Hereford. He was meant to be a residentiary canon, i.e. staying here in Hereford. You can't do that if you're actually based in Oxford.
I can understand how that would be annoying to Dean and Chapter. And so we're going to be performing something about Thomas Thornton, but we're also going to be looking at another significant character in the history of the Chained Library. Not a master of the library, but someone whose name kind of lives on within the walls, quite literally in many ways, actually. So tell us about him, about Streeter.
So Streeter was another of the canons here. So that's in the 1920s and 30s. He was here at Hereford. He wasn't, as you say, he was not the master of the library. In fact, he had no direct connection with the library in terms of a role, but he took it upon himself to investigate the layout of the library, and it became this kind of great detective hunt across the library, across the cathedral's premises, checking storehouses, checking rooms that no one had been in for some time. asking vergers and members of staff who'd been around for a number of years, what do you think about this? Can you find any bits of wood that look like this? And showing them examples. So his role was to realise that the layout of the library as it was at that time, 1920s, between the wars basically, was wildly incorrect, and that there was a lot more of the furniture of the library somewhere. So he set about trying to find it. They found the chains in a barrel, they found bits of wood being used as pews, they found bits of wood making cupboards here and there, and he sort of took it all and put it back together.
So Elizabeth, we got an exhibition at the moment called Master of the Library, which explores the masters of the library throughout history, and we're finishing with a special one-man show. Tell us about that.
So you, in fact, are going to be the star of that one-man show. You will occupy the twin roles in one evening of Thomas Thornton and of Canon Streeter. So people will have the chance to explore, alongside yourself performing, the enthusiasms and the work that those two men put into both creating and then reforming the Chained Library in those two different time periods. It's going to be a marvellous evening.
It will.